Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Merci d'être là. Comme vous le savez, notre but, c'est de rétablir la promesse du Canada où chacun qui travaille fort peut s'offrir une belle vie dans une belle maison avec de nourriture, d'épicerie abordables dans des communautés sécuritaires, c'est-à-dire un pays où le succès ne dépend pas de vos liens au gouvernement, mais au travail fort, acharné et de discipline. Et malheureusement, depuis 10 ans, des libéraux, c'est seulement ceux qui sont connectés au gouvernement qui sont capables de s'avancer. Malgré tout leur travail acharné, les jeunes, les gens de la classe ouvrière et les aînés ont de misère à payer leurs factures. L'inflation qui a bénéficié, qui a aidé à enrichir un petit groupe de riches en tête, a détruit la qualité de vie de la classe ouvrière et de nos aînés. La vie devient de plus en plus chère. Les jeunes perdent leurs emplois. Le gouvernement a favorisé des politiques pour aider un petit groupe d'élites, que ce soit immigration qui est hors de contrôle, qui favorise les corporations qui veulent réduire les salaires, que ce soit les dépenses inflationnistes qui a aidé des milliardaires à ajouter à leur richesse, que ce soit des grandes subventions aux entreprises favorisées, en même temps que le gouvernement punit des petites entreprises. On doit changer ça avec un gouvernement qui est capable de favoriser tout le monde, que tout le monde puisse avoir la chance de gagner une belle vie. Et ça prend un premier ministre en tête qui mette les intérêts publics avant ses intérêts privés. M. Carney a refusé de divulguer pendant des élections ses investissements pour permettre aux Canadiens de juger ces conflits d'intérêts potentiels. Finalement, vendredi, on a eu la chance de regarder ses intérêts et on voit un grand nombre de conflits d'intérêts et aussi des déclarations, des contradictions de ses propres déclarations. M. Carney n'a pas dit vrai pendant la campagne électorale. Je vais citer directement ces mots et les comparer aux faits que nous connaissons maintenant. Premièrement, il a dit « Je ne possède rien d'autre que de l'argent liquide et des biens immobiliers personnels, et cela ne changera pas dans la vie publique. » C'est pas vrai. En effet, lorsque M. Carney a dit ça, il savait qu'il possédait 574 actions, en plus des intérêts directs dans les entreprises de Brookfield et de Stripe. Donc, c'était absolument faux de dire qu'il n'avait pas d'autres avoirs que l'argent liquide et des biens immobiliers. C'était faux, et il le savait. Deuxièmement, il a dit que mes biens sont maintenant dans une fiducie sans droit de regard. Je ne sais donc pas ce qu'ils contiennent exactement. Ce n'est pas vrai non plus. C'est lui qui a rempli des formulaires pour le commissaire de l'éthique. C'est lui qui savait exactement les intérêts et les investissements qu'il avait à ce temps-là. Donc, c'était faux aussi. Troisièmement, je n'ai aucun intérêt dans Brookfield. Il a dit, je vais juste citer directement. Je n'ai pas de lien avec Brookfield Asset Management. Je n'ai plus de rôle, évidemment, puisque j'ai démissionné à la mi-janvier. Je n'ai pas de lien avec Brookfield. Mais on sait maintenant qu'il a des investissements directs et des bénéfices directs avec Brookfield qui vont continuer de payer. Il a des unités d'action qui vont payer des profits à lui plus tard. Il a aussi ça s'appelle des options d'achat d'actions et des unités d'action différées. Donc, ce n'était pas vrai de dire que tous les liens avec Brookfield avaient été coupés. Ça cause des problèmes, beaucoup de problèmes, parce que si le premier ministre dit des choses qui sont fausses pendant une campagne, comment les Canadiens peuvent-ils croire ce que le premier ministre dit pour l'avenir? Continuons. on sait que le premier ministre a montré une volonté d'utiliser son influence politique pour profiter. Par exemple, à plusieurs reprises avant d'entrer en politique, avant des élections, excuse-moi, il a agi de façon pour favoriser les entreprises dans lesquelles il a été investi. Par exemple, pendant le débat des chefs, il a parlé de Westinghouse, une entreprise d'électricité nucléaire, même si Brookfield, à ce temps-là, avait des investissements à Westinghouse. En plus, il a dit qu'il a utilisé son influence politique en Grande-Bretagne pour favoriser un règlement sur les combustibles d'aviation, obligeant des entreprises d'aviation d'acheter cet combustible. Et c'était un combustible dans lequel il avait été investi. Ces politiques peuvent aussi favoriser son profit. Par exemple, il veut dépenser des milliards de dollars pour subventionner des entreprises qui produisent des maisons et appartements modulaires. Et on sait que Brookfield était investi dans ces mêmes types de maisons et de production. Des pompes de chaleur aussi, c'est quelque chose qu'il voulait subventionner, c'est quelque chose dans lequel Brookfield avait été investi. Donc, les conservateurs sont ici aujourd'hui pour revendiquer que le premier ministre, explique pourquoi il a fait plusieurs déclarations fausses pendant la campagne électorale à l'égard de ses investissements. 2, nous demandons que le premier ministre vende tous ses investissements et donne de l'argent en monnaie à un fiduciaire qui peut l'investir de façon sans droit de regard pour M. Carney. C'est la seule façon de nous assurer que M. Carney ne sera pas au courant des investissements qu'il a et des profits qu'il peut retenir. C'est ça le but qu'on devrait poursuivre et c'est ça que les conservateurs vont pousser. Nous revendiquons aussi un changement à la loi de l'éthique et des conflits d'intérêts pour nous assurer que l'avenir, qu'un premier ministre ou une ministre doivent vendre ses investissements et mettre l'argent en monnaie dans une fiducie sans droit de regard, sans la capacité de profiter de ses décisions. C'est comme ça qu'on va rétablir l'imputabilité qui était l'esprit de la loi sur la responsabilité adoptée par le gouvernement Harper. Nous voulons un gouvernement qui travaille fort pour les Canadiens, pour tout le monde, pour tous les Canadiens et pour favoriser l'imputabilité de nos politiciens et tous ceux et celles qui travaillent dans le gouvernement. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, everyone. It is good to be here today, once again reiterating that our purpose as Conservatives is to restore the promise of Canada that anyone who works hard can get a good, affordable life in a nice house on a safe street, that your success is determined by your hard work, not by government favoritism, that this is a meritocracy, not an aristocracy, where the government works for the working class, for the seniors, and for everyday people who build this country every single day. And that can only happen if the Prime Minister is focused on the public interest rather than on private interests. On Friday, we finally got a look at the Prime Minister's many financial interests that he kept carefully hidden throughout the election and about which he told numerous falsehoods during that same campaign. And so these are what the revelations tell us. One, that Mr. Carney was not upfront or honest with Canadians during the election. He made numerous false statements he would have known were false when he made them. Two, there is a cornucopia of conflicts of interest in these investments, like we have never seen before from a Canadian Prime Minister. Let me go through and document all of these claims one by one. First of all, during the election campaign, Mr. Carney said, and I quote, "I own nothing but cash and personal real estate, and that's not going to change in public life." Well, it turns out, while he said that, he knowingly owned $574 stocks and deferred profits and stock options in Brookfield and other companies. So it was patently and now provably false for him to say he owned nothing but cash and real estate. 2, my assets are now in a blind trust, so I don't know what exactly is in there. That too is false. He must have known what was in that blind trust because he was the one that filled out the paperwork for the Ethics Commissioner to report those holdings. So he knew exactly what was in his blind trust, and he just did not want Canadians to know before they went to the polls. Finally, he said, and I quote, I do not have a connection with Brookfield Asset Management. Well, it turns out that he has continuing stock options and deferred share units in Brookfield Asset Management, and these options cannot be sold, or at least not easily, and we have no reason to believe they have been. So when he said that he had no connection to Brookfield, he was stating a patent falsehood. Now, why should we care? Why should Canadians care about this? Well, Mr. Carney has shown in the past his willingness to use his political connections in order to profit himself. For example, he said, let me see here, he gave public endorsement of Westinghouse in the Leaders debate. Westinghouse is a nuclear energy company which Brookfield is invested in. He has announced he's going to spend billions of dollars on modular homes. Brookfield is invested in modular homes. He says he wants to subsidize heat pumps. Brookfield is invested in heat pumps. He says that jet fuel, in the past he has said that he helped influence regulatory changes forcing aviation companies to buy certain kinds of jet fuel that one of his companies was invested in, so that air passengers have to pay more for their airline ticket to subsidize this specialty jet fuel that profits a company in which Mr. Carney had a financial interest. And the list of potential conflicts goes on and on. How can he possibly be involved in developing a budget when all the tax policies could impact on his investments directly or indirectly? How could he address things like competition policy when his companies might be impacted? Then there's, for example, the digital services tax. The digital services tax is paid by some of the companies that he is invested in, and therefore he has a potential or perceived conflict of interest in that as well. So Conservatives are calling for 2 things today. 1, we call on the Prime Minister to come before you and explain the contradiction. How is it that he was telling Canadians that he only had real estate and cash when he knowingly had stock options and other deferred benefits? How is it that he claimed he didn't know what was in his blind trust when we now learn that he knew exactly what was in that trust? And how is it that he said that he had no financial interest in Brookfield when he knew exactly that he had stock options and deferred share units? Finally, so we want him to explain why he told Canadians the opposite of the truth during the election campaign. Second, we're calling on the Prime Minister to sell his investments, turn them into cash, hand them to a trustee who can invest them in a way that is completely blind to him, so that he does not have any knowledge of what he owns. That is the spirit of a blind trust. A blind trust is meant to be something that the owner does not know anything about. That's what it means to be blind of the assets. But right now, Mr. Carney is clearly not blind of what he holds, because even we know what he holds due to this disclosure. And this will put him in an impossible position where he will be conflicted at every turn. So either he will have to get up 3 or 4 times every cabinet meeting to avoid stumbling over the 100+ potential conflicts that the Ethics Commissioner has identified, or he will act in the cabinet to potentially favor his own interests. Neither of those possibilities is acceptable. And so, again, we call for him to explain the falsehoods, sell his holdings, end the conflicts, work for Canadians. We need a Prime Minister whose only purpose is serving the Canadian people, to reverse the massive damage Liberals have done, to reverse the out-of-control immigration, inflation, crime, debt, and our spiraling economy. And here we are, a Prime Minister who's going to be constantly distracted by his private interests when the public interest is in such desperate need of attention. Look at how bad things are in Canada today, and getting worse. The debt is growing faster under Mark Carney than it was under Justin Trudeau. Mr. Carney is spending more in his first budget bill, for his first financial bill, spending more than Justin Trudeau was spending. The deficit looks like it could be even bigger under Carney than it was under Trudeau. We have rising unemployment, a crisis of jobs for our young people. Housing is still unaffordable, and Mr. Carney has so far kept the unsustainable immigration numbers that Justin Trudeau left behind, numbers that are overwhelming housing, health care, and jobs, that are dividing our country and breaking up any notion of integration. We need a Prime Minister who's fully focused on undoing the damage that the Liberals have done, not continuing that damage and focusing on his private interests. Conservatives stand ready to help. We will propose amendments to the ethics law that will make these changes that I have just called for, make them law rather than just good practice. We want this to be once again a country where the leaders work for the people, where hard work pays off, where government is on the side of everyday people who work hard, pay their taxes, and play by the rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now take questions from the floor.
Hi, Mr. Poilievre. Simon Tuck from National Post.
Hi, Simon.
You've had some time since the election to contemplate and think things over. Any plans to do things differently, either in terms of your team or your approach, anything like that?
Yeah, look, every election comes with lessons. We want to continue to work hard to reach out to people. We want people to know that, our mission remains the same. Our mission is to give people back control of their lives, to make this a country where anyone who works hard gets a good life, and that, homes are affordable, our streets are safe, immigration works for Canada first. Those are going to be the things we focus on. At the same time, we have to ask how we can reach more people with that message. We know now, we ended up getting a tremendous result, 41% of the vote, an extra 2.5 million votes, but 41% might not be enough in the future. And so we have to ask, how can we expand even beyond that number and reach even more Canadians with our message? We need to present ourselves as a government of waiting. Yes, we'll do a great job of prosecuting as official opposition, but we also need to present ourselves as a government in waiting so that when the time comes, Canadians can feel confident in choosing us to lead the country forward. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Poilievre. Stephanie Levitz, the Globe and Mail. Nice to see you. Your party voted in favor of Bill C-5, and as I think you know, Mr. Carney has a meeting this week with First Nations leadership to go over their concerns with the bill. I wonder if you could articulate why you see the legislation as being respectful of Indigenous rights. You voted for it. And what, if anything, you think Mr. Carney ought to be doing to forestall, excuse me, the potential for protests or court challenges as this bill begins to be implemented?
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Let me first say that C-5's far from a solution. It's better than nothing, but not by much. The logic, there's a very big flawed logic in the approach the Liberals are taking. First of all, they've put in terrible laws that block development. C-69, the anti-development law, C-48, the ban on offshore shipping, the emissions cap, the industrial carbon tax. And then they've acknowledged that those laws are terrible, so they've passed another law to go around those terrible laws for select projects. This may allow some projects to go ahead. Some is better than none, and that's why we agreed to vote for it. We wanted the possibility that something, anything, could get built in this country, which is not possible under the bad laws the Liberals put in place to begin with. So I don't want anybody to think for a second that we think C-5 is a solution. The real solution is to get rid of C-69, C-48, the emissions cap, the industrial carbon tax, and many more of these other terrible Liberal policies. Then and only then will the hundreds or even thousands of projects that need to go ahead have a free market in which to do so. Now here we are in this strange situation where the Prime Minister has to select these projects to go ahead. Obviously, the best way forward is to win First Nations buy-in. And what I would say is the best way to do that is to ensure that First Peoples benefit from the projects. We had a policy during the election campaign, which I continue to support, which allow businesses to divert a share of their federal corporate tax to the local First Nations on whose lands the projects go ahead. This would be own source revenue for First Nations to build schools, hospitals, clean drinking water systems, job training, you name it. And they wouldn't have to go back to Ottawa to ask for money from federal bureaucrats. It would come directly to them. So I think that is one example of how we can make these projects beneficial to First Peoples, and they want to participate. If you talk to many of the First Nations people across the country, they desperately want to prosper from our incredible resources, and we should work with them to do it. I also think the Prime Minister should set up shovel-ready zones in consultation with First Nations governments that have pre-permits so that projects can go ahead and that First Nations people can be part of them from the very start. I think our First Nations people can be the richest in the entire world. That should be our goal. And only with good policy and hard work can that happen. Thank you.
Bonjour, M. Poilievre, Valérie Gamache de Radio-Canada. J'espère que vous passez un bel été.
Merci beaucoup.
Je vais rebondir sur cette rencontre avec les leaders autochtones concernant la loi C5. Comme il y a vraiment urgence d'agir en raison de la guerre commerciale, est-ce que les leaders autochtones, les Premières Nations, devraient accepter de faire des compromis?
Je pense que tout le monde va devoir faire des compromis, c'est sûr. Quand on fait des grands projets d'envergure, on a des partenaires, des travailleurs, des investisseurs, des gouvernements, des Premières Nations. Tout le monde doit travailler ensemble afin d'obtenir un bon résultat. Mais je souligne que les Premières Nations peuvent profiter même plus que tous les autres Canadiens. C'est une opportunité exceptionnelle de mettre fin à la pauvreté, totalement mettre fin à la pauvreté dans les communautés autochtones avec un développement des ressources qui vont fournir des emplois, de revenus pour des programmes sociaux et j'en passe. Donc, ce n'est pas les Premières Nations qui sont le problème, c'est les bureaucrates et les politiciens à Ottawa. Les Premières Nations avec lesquelles je travaille disent vouloir développer nos ressources naturelles. Je vous donne l'exemple de M. Ellis Ross, qui fait partie de notre caucus dans le nord-ouest de la Colombie-Britannique. C'était lui, comme premier conseiller des Haisla, qui a aidé à compléter le projet GNL Canada, ce qui est le plus grand projet dans l'histoire du Canada, 40 milliards de dollars qui a profité à son peuple. Ça peut être un exemple qu'on peut partager à travers le monde. Et maintenant, le peuple Haisla va profiter énormément à cause de ce projet. C'est un modèle qu'on devrait répéter à travers le Canada. I just want to repeat that last part in English, because I forgot to mention it. You think of someone like Ellis Ross, who was the first counselor, the chief counselor of the Haisla First Nation. He helped put together the LNG Canada deal in northwest British Columbia that has a terminus at Kitimat, $40 billion. This is the biggest project in the history of Canada, ever. There's never been a $40 billion project. And that doesn't include the pipeline component, which is another $5 or $10 billion. And his people will benefit for many generations as a result of that. Let's take that model, let's spread it right across the country, and let's make our First Nations and all Canadians have the chance to become the most prosperous on earth.
Hello, Mr. Poilievre, Ellie Canton-Nantel with The Hub. During the campaign, I visited Western Canada and was honestly shocked with the level of frustration and alienation in Western Canada. You're currently running for Western Canadian seats. What do you have to say to people in the West who are so frustrated that they think that even if you were to become Prime Minister, given that you wouldn't be Prime Minister forever, it's better to just separate than to keep in Confederation because they just think Canada is so broken?
Well, I disagree with separation. I'm a Canadian patriot. I was born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, and I understand the frustration. I still think that there's no other country in the world where someone of my modest origins would be able to make it to this place, and that's the story that millions of people have lived and relived from across the country. So we are united by that Canadian promise. But as I say, and I say it here and I've been saying for years, we have to put a final end to this notion that Ottawa tells Alberta to pay up and shut up. And that's what Albertans have been told by this Liberal government for a decade. Their frustrations are entirely legitimate. You know, Alberta is the #1 net contributor, per capita contributor to Confederation, paying more in tax than getting back in federal programs. The major resource, the major industry of Alberta has been under relentless attack for the last 10 years. The rural and western way of life is under attack with ridiculous gun bans, all while allowing repeat offenders to go and terrorize communities, including rural communities where crime is now, for the first time in a generation, a serious danger in communities where people didn't even have to lock their doors. So I say all of that to point out that the frustration is real and it is legitimate, and we should neither dismiss it nor deride the people who hold those frustrations. It's the job of all federal leaders and frankly all members of Parliament to redress the very unfair treatment that Western Canada has been receiving, and I pledge to do that. I understand it. For me it's personal. I was born in '79. It was a few years later that Trudeau 1 hit us all with the big national energy program. My folks were teachers, so they didn't lose their jobs like so many others, but we got smashed with the 20% interest rates on mortgages like everyone else. And I grew up understanding that the federal government had viciously attacked the Alberta economy. And so one of the reasons I got into politics was to bring fairness to my province and to my region. And we'll continue to fight for that by repealing the anti-energy laws, unlocking free enterprise, shrinking the size of the federal government so more of Alberta's money stays in the hands of Albertans, getting rid of the dumb gun laws and instead locking up the real criminals. That's how we redress the very real and legitimate frustration of Albertans, and that's how we unite all Canadians. One last thing I would say is, let's build alliances. Albertans should build alliances with Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who want to develop their oil and gas. They want to develop, our Newfoundland and Labrador cousins want to double their production. We should support that. Let's develop alliances with coastal First Nations who want to liquefy and export Alberta's natural gas over to Asia to get $14 instead of $3 for it. Let's build alliances with Greater Toronto Area communities that want an end to catch and release, to lock up criminals, or to miners in Timmins who want to develop resources or who want to keep their hunting rifles. That's how you get things done. Build alliances to get good results that serve Albertans and all Canadians. Thank you.
And we have the final question.
Hi, Mr. Poilievre, Sopal Dutch Global News. You previously called for severe limits to population growth in Canada. Can you clarify what you mean by that?
So, first of all, I'll tell you what I don't mean, which is natural population growth. That is almost non-existent in Canada. We have roughly the same number of people who die as who are born. So all of our population growth, in fact, in the last quarter, I think there were more deaths than births. So what I am referring to is migration, net migration. We have millions of people whose permits will expire over the next couple of years, and many of them will leave. We need to ensure that more leave than come in over the next couple of years while we catch up. Well, housing, healthcare, and jobs can catch up. We've had population growth of roughly 1 million a year under the Liberals, while we barely build 200,000 homes. Our job market is stalled, and yet we're adding more people to the workforce. Our young people are facing generational highs in unemployment because the multinational corporations are giving jobs to low-wage, temporary foreign workers, and that ultimately leave our young people without opportunities. Our country is divided, and we're not able to integrate people at this pace. So in order to fix the problem, we've got to we need to put very hard caps on immigration levels. We need more people leaving than coming for the next couple of years, and we need so our country can actually catch up. Our immigration policy should invite the right people in the right numbers in a way that puts Canada and Canadians first.
Thank you. That concludes today's press conference.
Thank you.
The comment you made in French about compromise. comment about the need for compromise around C5. Could you
Sure.
just say that in
You
English?
want it in English?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, of course, everybody's going to have to compromise. Whenever you do a big project where you got workers, investors, governments, local communities, and First Nations, everyone's going to have to make some compromises in order to get things done. And that's how big projects get completed, no matter what. So the good news is that everybody, all of those different groups, can be big net winners. Like, these projects are incredibly positive for everyone who participates. Local neighborhoods get more jobs and money. First Nations get resources, financial resources to pay for the benefit of their peoples. And then the governments get revenues for hospitals and schools. So it's a win-win-win. But everybody needs to focus on just getting it done. You know, like I said at the outset, we've seen these projects be an enormous benefit wherever they're done to the First Nations people who participate. And the government should sit down with First Nations, find out what they need to do to make these things possible, and get it done. Because that's the problem with our country right now. We can't get anything done. It's taking 17 years to get a mine approved. We have permits that are 3 times longer than in the US or the UK. We have more resources per person than almost any country on earth, and yet we're leaving it in the ground, and we're giving our resources to the Americans on the cheap. The only ones who win from that are foreign interests. So let's put our heads together, get these decisions made, and make our country stronger, more self-reliant, and sovereign. Thank you very much.
Thank you.